嘅表演係三棵樹。我哋睇下我哋呢班年青人係呢三棵樹講緊啲乜嘢啦。And now it's our fellowship and they will present a cathedral today and it's a story of three trees.
Once upon a mountaintop, three little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. The first little tree looked up at the stars and said,
I want to build treasure. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I'll be the most beautiful tree in the world.
The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling by on its way to the ocean and said,
I want to be traveling mighty waters and carrying powerful things. I shall be the strongest ship in the world.
The third little tree looked down to the valley where busy men and women worked in a busy town and thought,
I don't want to leave the mountaintop at all. I want to grow so tall that when people look at me, they'll raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world.
Years passed, the rain came, the sun shone, and the little trees grew tall. One day, three woodcutters climbed a mountain. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said,
This tree is beautiful. It is perfect for me.
With the swoop of the shining axe, the first tree fell.
Now I shall hold now I shall make a beautiful treasure chest, and I shall hold wonderful treasure.
The second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said,
This tree is strong. It's perfect for me.
With the swoop of the shining axe, the second tree fell.
Now I shall sail mighty waters and carry powerful kings.
The third tree felt his heart sink when the last cutter looked his way. He stood straight and tall and pointed bravely to heaven, but the woodcutter never even looked up.
Any tree will do for me.
He muttered, and with the swoop of the shining axe, the last tree fell.
The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter shop, but the carpenter fashioned her into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold or treasure, but was coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. The second tree smiled when the second woodcutter brought her to a shipyard, but no mighty sailing ship was made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was hammered and sawed into a simple fishing boat. She was too small and too weak to sail out to an ocean, or even a river. Instead, she was taken to a little lake. The third tree was confused when the last woodcutter cut him up into strong beams and left him in a lumber yard.
What happened? All I wanted to do was stay on the mountaintop and point to God.
Many days and nights passed. The three trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby into the feed box.
I wish I could have made a cradle for you.
Her husband whispered. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood.
This baby is beautiful,
She said, and suddenly the first tree knew.
I must be holding the greatest treasure in the world.
One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep as the second tree quietly sailed into the lake. Soon, a thundering and a thrashing storm arose. The little tree shuddered. She knew she did not have the strength to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and the rain. The tired man awoke. He stood up, stretched out his arm, and said, The storm stopped as quickly as it had begun, and suddenly the second tree knew.
I must be carrying the kingdom of heaven and earth.
One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when his beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. He flinched as he was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. He shuddered when a man's hands were nailed to him. He felt ugly, hard, and cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy, the third tree knew.
God's love has changed everything.
And made the first tree beautiful. And made the second tree strong. And whenever people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. So this season, when we think of God's love, every time we pass a tree, and may His love fill our homes as we adorn our own Merry Christmas tree.